If you're building design systems, don't make these mistakes. I've made them before and they've cost me time, effort, and unnecessary headaches. Let me tell you what they are and what I do differently now. I've been working on design systems for many years now, and I've built more than I can even count these days. And now I'm at a point that I've developed a fairly repeatable process, and I know a few red flags and things to look out for as you're building. But it wasn't always like that. I've definitely made my fair share of mistakes with building design systems. And there are some things that I do differently now to avoid them. Let's go through some of those mistakes and let me tell you what I've learned along the way. The first mistake I used to make is overcomplicating them. I used to think the more components a design system had, the better it would be. So sometimes I'd go through and add unnecessary variants because in my head, they would maybe solve some distant edge case that didn't actually exist, but maybe if this happened and that happened, they would need this sort of variant. I did this because I wanted the design system to feel more complete. In theory, this does sound good. You do want a complete design system, but there is some trade-offs and some issues that start to arise, such as it costs more to develop and it takes longer, especially if you are working with engineers who are building this in Storybook, for example. There is more things for them to build. So this naturally is going to take longer to do and cost more money. It also creates room for incorrect use. For example, if it's developers building products, or it's content editors making pages in a CMS, if there's more components to choose from, there's a chance that they'll choose the incorrect one and start mixing and matching components together. And this is an issue because one of the big benefits of having a design system is the consistency as things get built out, and it also takes the guesswork out of what components to use to build things. So if there is this room for errors to arise, you're not really accomplishing one of the big things that you would want a design system for in the first place. One of the areas I've shifted my focus is, instead of making a design system larger for the sake of being larger, I really want it to be more easy to adopt for someone to use. It should be really clear and streamlined so that for anyone who is using it, it's really easy to understand which components you should be using to build things, and it has the right amount of things in it. I do believe now that a smaller, more refined design system is actually much more beneficial compared to one that has become quite bloated and has added a lot more components into it for the sake of it. So I guess the question then comes up of, how do you work out what the right components are to put into a design system? And that's what this next point is all about. So mistake number 2 is about don't skip the discovery phase. A mistake I used to make is I would jump straight into Figma as soon as I could and start setting up components or start setting up the tokens or the variables in Figma for it. And I'd really do this without actually taking the time to fully understand the product that we were building. This led to problems down the line of, have I built the right components when I'm in meetings saying the design system is finished? How do I actually know that I have all the right components in here? And that would open room for there to be more rework required. And it's also harder to track, is this solving the actual needs of the user or what we were setting out to accomplish with this design system? Now it's better to take a step back and actually really think of, in the discovery phase, of understanding fully, what are we trying to solve with this design system? How is it going to be used internally and externally? What are the big pain points that this design system should actually be solving for people? Really diving into if it's user research or understanding, talking to internal people who are going to be building this, if it's developers building products, or it's content managers managing a CMS, what issues are arising? They're the ones who have the expert knowledge of, they're using what they currently have every day. If they have an old design system or they have a no design system, it's a bit of a wild west. What things are happening on a daily basis that they are finding frustrating? And this really helps you to build with purpose. So you're building on real user needs instead of just assumptions. Now this kind of goes into the next point. These two kind of bleed together. But the next point, and the mistake I used to make, is about setting clear goals for the design system. As I said, this is a bit of a follow-on from the last point. These two are slightly connected. So now that you've spent the right amount of time doing discovery and understanding the product or whatever you're building for, the next step is about defining what success looks like. Because really, at the end of the day, a design system isn't just a set of components. That would be looking at it as a UI kit. A design system really should have a purpose and solve problems. Because without this step, it's hard at the end of the day when you finish a product. Have you actually helped the organization? Sure, it might look nicer, but are they going to run into the same issues later on? When they're building out their next product, are the developers going to run into the same things of not understanding which components they should use? Is there going to be inconsistencies in color and spacing? If these things are coming up, I don't think the design system is really serving the purpose that it should be for them. So some common goals that come out a lot of times in projects when building design systems are increase speed of building. This way designers and developers can build faster. If you have all the components and the sections built up, Next time that you need to create a new page or a new product or something on the website or the web app or a mobile app, it's much easier to mock it up with all these pre-built items instead of having to go back to the drawing board and think, how are we going to build this page? And because with the previous step of understanding in the discovery phase, you'll know what components they will need. Next common goal is increase consistency. There really shouldn't be 52 different hex colors of a similar kind of blue. If you set up the tokens correctly and the developers are pulled from them, they always have a source of truth to look at, and they will know what the hex value should be. This way you'll get a lot more unification across different products. And the last common goal that I see come up is reducing unnecessary questions. A great part of a design system is that it's much clearer and easier, because if you've solved a problem once with a UX pattern that you have in the design system, next time a similar problem comes up, you can look back, and if you've documented it correctly, you can use that UX pattern again. That gives everyone a lot more time to focus on new problems that are arising and helping the user as the product keeps building out, but you're not doubling handling the same thing over and over again. It's very important as well with whatever goals that you've worked out that you're working toward, that it gets agreed on all different levels of the organization. If the leadership team is expecting one thing, and then the design and development and product team are expecting a different thing, it's really gonna be hard at the end of the day to show how effective this design system is gonna be if they both have different expectations. So it's really important to make sure that everyone agrees, from decision makers to daily makers, that they're all unified in what this design system is working towards. By clearly defining the why at the start, it will help you work towards a great solution. And this will avoid, as I said before, just adding components for the sake. And now the last mistake is about not collaborating with developers early and often. Sometimes as a designer, if you're like me, we have a bad habit of we'll go into Figma and isolate ourselves and really just want to get into that flow state and start cranking stuff out. The issue with this is that if we haven't aligned with the developers early and there isn't regular check-in point, there's a lot of room for feasibility issues to arise of you've started building this awesome thing over here, but the developers are actually going to build this off another design system, and it's actually going to be a lot of rework for them to work out how to build it. There's going to be natural issues that arise with that, and the unnecessary tension between the design and the development team. That's why I really love every time I build a design system, I want to get on board with the developer or the engineer team early to understand how they see this project working. You want to collaborate, you don't want to be butting heads with each other. So some questions that it's worth asking is that, are they using a framework? Is there pre-existing things they're planning on building this off? Is there naming conventions that will help them that you can set up in Figma? And then you can have a one-to-one match. Also, some other questions I find really useful is what level of documentation, if you're doing a handover process, what kind of documentation or annotations are they actually looking for? I find documentation and annotation can kind of be like, how long is a piece of string? You can go in it forever and you can keep documenting every single little tiny thing. And sometimes that's great, but if the developers actually don't find that useful and aren't actually looking for that, it's really a waste of time. So aligning at the start of if there's things that they need, or if it's better for them to take it earlier and keep some time later on to be able to jump on calls and ask questions about natural issues that arise. This is really worth setting up at the start. If you've worked on previous design systems as well, it's worth taking a developer through it so they can kind of see what you plan on doing. And then you can set that expectations early of, you know, maybe I'll set up all the components on this page, I'll have the variables set up that will have primitive and semantic levels. And this really helps to set up a good working relationship, as it's going to be a much more streamlined implementation if you set this up early. Some other things as well, if you are going to work in that collaborative way, how do they want to track things? Do they have a Notion, a Trello, a Jira? Do they want detailed tickets logged that they can follow and batch them out later on? Are they going to be build things on a component level? Are they going to be looking at page designs as a reference? All these are great things that it's really good to just allow the time to have this conversation with developers so they can be heard and understood. Because really at the end of the day, you are going to build it in Figma. And then if this is a live product, it's going to need to have the live components built somewhere else with React or something like that. So the design system isn't just your Figma design. This will also help you to understand a more holistic view of what does this design system actually going to look like? Where does it fit into the organization? Where are they going to be keeping the components? How are they going to be referencing those things? So to try to recap at a top level, keep it streamlined, keep it simple if possible. You don't have to add bloat to a design system. Make sure you start with discovery phase and make sure you invest enough time into that to understand the problems that you're trying to solve. Once you understand those problems, take them and set out clear goals that everyone agrees with that you're working toward. And lastly, make sure that you're not in isolation. You want to be collaborating early and you want to be collaborating often. Do these things and I promise you, you will build better design systems. Thanks so much for watching. I love talking about design systems. If you have any further questions about this or other things you want explored in design systems, leave a comment below. Hey, and while you're here, check out another video.